Paul's message to Philemon was a simple one. Based on the work of love and forgiveness that had been begun in Philemon's heart by God, well, Paul urged him to show the very same forgiveness and love to the escaped and now fellow believer, the slave Onesimus. Paul could speak plainly to Philemon because they knew each other well. Paul had been the one to explain the gospel to Philemon and had witnessed the profound result, the new life that was blossoming in a heart that knew nothing of grace before. Now, Paul knew that conversion is nothing to trifle with, that it should be honored and fostered. So Paul is bold enough to suggest that Philemon has a chance now to pay it forward. So Paul makes a request. He wants Philemon to forgive Onesimus, to accept the slave as a brother in Christ, to receive him back home warmly with no punishment. He suggests he might even consider sending Onesimus back to Paul if he prefers, as the apostle had found him useful in God's service. But he knows now that Onesimus has an opportunity to develop a special kind of relationship with Philemon, something that will be much, much closer than householder and slave. Now, Paul does not minimize Onesimus's crime. Although it matters to us, we wonder why Onesimus ran away. It really doesn't matter to the law. The law said that he was not free, despite what any newfound faith had told him, that God doesn't differentiate between slaves and owners when it comes to his saving grace. God's love was for all, but the law said that Onesimus belonged to Philemon's household. And by running away, he had in effect stolen from his employer, something for which he could expect to be severely punished. Accordingly, Paul knows what a big deal this is going to be to ask Philemon to forgive Onesimus, to take him back to not punishment, but instead to treat him like the brother in Christ that he now is. Doesn't it sound a little bit to you like the prodigal son, to have expected upon return after having basically run away to be welcomed at home with a certain amount of shame and condemnation, but instead to be greeted with love and rejoicing and a party held upon your return. This opportunity for Philemon to do this for Onesimus is really, really gospel stuff. Paul is asking Philemon to do the right thing, or the Christian thing, you might say, rather than settling for the satisfying or the safe thing. Without a doubt, it would have been easier for Philemon to have been stubbornly unforgiving of the wrong done to him socially and insist on punishing Onesimus. He had the law and society on his side. Every great household had slaves, and one simply did not tolerate runaways, otherwise the whole social structure would collapse. Now, it's natural that we will read the story with modern eyes and sensibilities, and we're going to bring to it our beliefs that slavery is wrong, and even a sense of outrage that someone who called himself a Christian would own a slave. We might feel like shouting that of course Philemon should change his thinking and not just welcome Onesimus home, but must also set him free. Anything less, like remaining a slave owner, is hard to reconcile with our idea of what a Christian should be. But it's important to know that Onesimus had done something wrong in every sense of the law in his day and age. He would not have and should not have expected any kind of clemency from his master. Now, it's really important to realize that in order to fully comprehend the magnitude of what Paul is suggesting Philemon should do. There was a significant sacrifice required in this request, and because of that, Paul approached the topic with a gentleness and care that we don't always see in his letters. In his letter to Philemon, he presents in full color the beautiful and majestic transition from slavery to kinship that comes as a result of Christian love and forgiveness. Live long enough and you'll understand the difficulty of forgiving someone when you have been wronged. It does not come easy. And yet, as believers, we have to recognize that our ability and willingness to offer it are the result of Christ's saving work on the cross. Because of that fact, forgiveness serves as a determining factor in who we say we are and how we hope to live our lives. When we do not forgive, bitterness takes root in our hearts and chokes the life right out of us. This short little letter to a fellow named Philemon shows how lofty doctrines such as the love of God, forgiveness in Christ, or the inherent dignity of humanity have real and pertinent impact in everyday life. The book of Philemon illustrates that principles like these can and should profoundly affect the lives of believers. Philemon is being asked to put his money where his mouth is, you might say. If he is a true follower of Jesus, what should come first? His financial interest in a person's role in the household business, or his interest in the person themselves, seeing them as a beloved child of God? Can Philemon dare to sacrifice his social standing in the community with this bold act of divine grace? Now, we might wonder, in what ways has forgiveness been a struggle for each of us since we accepted Christ's forgiveness? The Lord's Prayer reminds us that we are truly only as forgiven as we forgive others. I think Philemon would have made a good Presbyterian. In this case, what is needing to be forgiven is Onesimus's debt to him. Paul knew that Philemon would surely remember how God had forgiven his own debts not so very long before. And because of that, Paul was reasonably certain that he was sending Onesimus home to safety. Learning how to forgive will almost certainly be a lifelong task for most of us in our journey as Christian disciples. Perhaps you need to forgive someone, but you're afraid of what others will say if you do. Maybe they'll say that you're weak, or you're too easy on that kid, or you're a pushover. Is it just your pride that's holding you back, though? Fear of losing face? We can see that the disciple, Simon Peter, is a fan of tough love. When he asked Jesus in Matthew 18:21, "Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and that I have to forgive him? Up to 7 times? And Jesus' radical answer was instead 70 times 7, meaning you are to forgive someone who sins against you as many times as needed. That's incredible. Being able to forgive things both large and small are the foundational test of our commitment to being followers of Jesus. I hope that you will allow Paul's little letter to Philemon to be a deep reminder that our faith is not just something that we believe, that we talk about, but is something that we must live out in our relationship with others. May God bless you as you dare to forgive someone today. Next week, in our People You Should Know series, we'll be taking a peek into the life of author C.S. Lewis, known to many for his Narnia stories and for devotional books like A Grief Observed, Mere Christianity, and Surprised by Joy. Like Philemon, his faith compelled him to make a tremendous sacrifice. And that sacrifice, surprisingly, was daring to love with all of his heart. Meanwhile, I invite you to ponder the words of the song by Matthew West that we're going to hear now. It's a new song to me, but seemed just right for today's message on forgiveness. Let's listen and let God speak to our hearts.